Good morning, everyone. So today is June 17, 2017. Oh, so 17/17. So this is a great day for us to start a book review. There will be two books, but the first one that I'll be reviewing is this book. Uh, this is written by Jerry Downing, and the title is Between Conviction and Uncertainty. Subtitle is Philosophical Guidelines for the Practicing Psychotherapist. Okay, my first impression while I was reading this book was like I was reading a textbook. So, for those of us who are not really into this type of books, perhaps let me just try to simplify. Reading through the pages, I also I also tried asking some questions, maybe intriguing or not, but after reading this book, there were there were interesting questions that came to mind, no? But let me start by giving you an assumption by Downey that, psychotherapists, he said, psychotherapists are not trained to become philosophical thinkers. So I was asking myself, then is he putting distinction between what is supposed to be psychology or psychotherapy and philosophy? Well, I think it's moot and academic that there is integration in any course, no, in science courses with philosophy. For example, if you look at the curriculum of psychology, there it starts with the mission and vision, right? So mission and vision, principles, ethics, ethical standards, all these things are part of the realm of philosophy. But then, what really is the point of that? That psychotherapists are not really trained to theorize in terms of philosophy. Now, let's define what philosophy is. And then later on, let's try to maybe just simplify what psychotherapy is. We'll start with philosophy. Philosophy is a study of fundamental aspects of knowledge, a fundamental nature of knowledge, and the study of existence. In that, psychotherapy is a science. It's a science that would observe, evaluate, evaluate, and interpret human behavior, and even uh, provide intervention for a certain unusual behavior. So that these are the definitions of the two disciplines. Now, what then is the role of philosophy? So, reading through the book, there's so many theories, no? Models, frameworks. But one page that caught my attention here is page 102. This is where you can find the table. So the table one, is titled Philosophical Positions Regarding Truth. So there are philosophical positions regarding truth. On the question whether the psychotherapist is applying correct interpretation to the human behavior, that can also be asked in this table, right? Whether what on the basis of what truth does the psychotherapist act or interpret human behavior? And so you would see that here in this table that it will start with scientific realism, sophisticated realism, relativism, and anti-realism. You would see that at the first column, scientific realism is under philosophy as well. So scientific realism is where psychotherapy would come in. Simple. When you say scientific realism, the very maxim of science is to see is to believe. So that is a very maxim. To see is to believe. You have to study, you have to see the behavior, test the behavior, and offer interpretation, intervention, and interpretation of behavior. But remember, there is such in philosophy, there are several positions taken. So uh, there is sophisticated realism, right? So there is, for example, scientific truth isn't possible, but our tested theories can approximate it. And then there's sophisticated realism. Scientific truth isn't possible, but scientific communities can produce socially mediated knowledge. But then there's anti-realism. Uh, Skeptical, neither truth nor knowledge is possible. Now, what is really the fundamental argument between these two disciplines? Let's go back to the fundamental truth of existence. So we will start with science. Science would assert that uh, Darwinian's theory of evolution makes sense. It makes sense because they have archaeological evidence proving that our skull may be as a form of evolution from the skull of an ape. And that is a theory. That is a Darwinian theory. But then there is as well anti-realism position in philosophy. That's why, if you'd ask me, why is it there are few subjects already in terms of science courses, uh, including philosophical subjects? Perhaps if you'd ask me, because there are so many complicated arguments talking about, for example, the fundamental truth about existence. So, in philosophy, what is being discussed are truth conditions. So, these are simple things that are actually made complicated because you need to assert arguments. You need to prove one point by providing certain truth conditions. Now, in this case, we are clear that science is not absolute. Okay, let me prove a point. One of my influences is Robert Barron. Robert Barron is, I think, one of my influences. I follow him. I read his essay, his work, his works, and so he would always say that there are certain things that science cannot account for. They can account for what, when, how. But one thing that science cannot account for is a why. Talking about human existence, they cannot account for the why. Why? Why are human beings created? Why is the earth created? Why is the earth created? So, these are fundamental arguments in philosophy. Uh, as I was saying, scientific realism can also can also be under philosophy. Now, let's go back. Let's go back to what is supposed to be the work of psychotherapists. So, if there's a patient who is depressed, for example, so after observing, analyzing the behavior, giving series of behavioral experimental tests, and then administering interventions, after all the things performed, still the patient is still not reacting. So what then is the next move? Next move is categorize the patient into from average, severe, then offer another intervention good for severe. What's the basis? They are basing this uh, on the previous cases that worked in the past. But then there are cases where a patient, even after all the categories, after all the tests, after categorizing the patient into this and that, let's say into a severe case, still the patient does not react to the therapy. So what will happen? It's either they will proceed to the next level or a psychotherapist can refer the patient to another expert. Now, we answered the question what, maybe when, where, how, but then the question is why? Why does that patient have or elicit or manifests such unusual behavior? Why? Where does that start? So I'm asking as to where does the work of the psychotherapist end? Does she end at just interpreting the results, and after that, if it's not working, what's next? So, question: does a psychotherapist go out on his or her way, communicating, having a dialogue with the parents? Maybe perhaps for some, but in a conventional, traditional way, a psychotherapist would just stay in the office and then just observe the patient in the office. But as to really try to determine why, what's really the source of the problem, I don't think that is still the work of a psychotherapist. Perhaps that's the work of the family or whoever is really concerned with that individual. Now, in terms of psychotherapists who might be providing spiritual intervention, again, another question. Is it scientific to consider spiritual intervention? So, these are perhaps my basic questions as to, do we stop at the question, answering the question what, when, how, where, or do we need to really try to address the question why? Same thing with the fundamental truth about existence. Do we just stop by saying that, okay, here we have the archaeological findings, we have the skull, we have the bones, and what's next? What is there in human existence? So what is there in humans' behavior? Right? So what is there in humans' behavior that we need to address? Right? So perhaps these are basic questions that I was able to formulate out of reading this book. So very challenging. So perhaps talking about the faculty or arguing about fundamental existence, about the nature of knowledge, epistemology in research, perhaps I would like to think that there is more. Science is something that is not absolute. There is more to just what, when, where. There is more to the statistics, the statistical treatments that we are administering, the tests and all. I think there has to be, we need to address the question on why. Why does this patient act this way? So as to what would be the proper or correct interpretation of behavior, I think we have all the case studies in the past that we can study in the literature. But as to why we're doing this, then we go back to the mission and vision of the company we are working with, or of the school that we graduated. Go back to the mission and vision. And that would lead us to the answer of whatever we are questioning and problematizing. Right? So my next book that I'm going to review is Sala's Strength for Today. As promised, I'll be reviewing this in a while. So let me just rest for a while, and then maybe recap this, review, and then I'm going to blog this in a while, right? So I'll just edit this one, then upload this. Bye, see you later.